New York City has just shattered every expectation. The city of towering skyscrapers, bustling streets, and endless ambition has made a choice that has left the nation stunned. Zohran Mamdani, a self-proclaimed democratic socialist, is now mayor. To some, it feels like a revolution, a bold statement that the ordinary people still have a voice. To others, it's a warning, a potential disaster waiting to unfold in the financial heart of America. But this isn't just about one man or one election. It's about a deeper shift, a challenge to the system itself. A city that has long symbolized power, money, and influence is now saying enough. And when New York moves, the country watches and often follows. Election night was electric, almost surreal. The air in the city seemed charged, heavy with expectation. Polls predicted a tight race in favor of the well-established, well-funded candidate. The safe choice, the predictable choice. But as the night wore on, predictions crumbled. District after district flipped in ways no one anticipated. The usual patterns, lines drawn along income, race, and neighborhood, broke apart as if erased, replaced by something unpredictable, raw, unfiltered desire for change. On the streets, the energy was palpable. Young people, exhausted workers, gig economy fighters, parents juggling multiple jobs. Thousands who rarely voted were now standing in line for hours, their faces a mixture of hope and defiance. This wasn't loyalty to a party. It was a statement: we will not be ignored anymore. And yet chaos shadowed the city. Bomb threats, prank calls, swatting attempts. Polling stations were disrupted across the city. Many of these disruptions targeted districts leaning conservative. Law enforcement scrambled to contain panic, but by the time the threats were resolved, the narrative was set. This election would not be ordinary. Then the ballots themselves caused a stir. Voters began posting photos online revealing something unusual. Mamdani's name appeared twice on many ballots, while his opponent's name appeared only once, tucked away in the corner. Was it a clerical mistake or a subtle manipulation of the system? No one knew, and the uncertainty fueled debates and social media fires across the city. Even with this strange anomaly, the real shock was turnout. In previous elections, barely 170,000 people had voted early this year, over 700,000, and the majority of those voters were over 44 years old. Far from Mamdani's expected base of young progressives by every conventional metric. He should have lost. And yet he didn't. He won decisively. This wasn't just a victory, it was an earthquake. To understand why, you have to look beneath the surface, past the headlines and hashtags, into the deep, simmering frustration of a city stretched to its limits. This is the anger that builds over decades. The frustration of soaring rents, stagnant wages, and a system that seemed to reward billionaires while leaving everyone else behind. It's the exhaustion of watching the same faces rotate through power, promising change, delivering little, and leaving the public to fend for itself. History has shown us what this feels like. In the 1970s, New York teetered on the brink of collapse. Trash piled up in the streets. Crime seemed unstoppable. People were desperate for change, for anyone willing to rebuild the city from the ground up. Decades later, in 2016, a different kind of outsider harnessed the same energy, propelling Donald Trump to the presidency. Trump's power came from conservative anger, Mamdani's from urban frustration. Two sides, opposite ideologies, same underlying emotion. Rage at a system that leaves people behind. For young New Yorkers, Mamdani's message resonated personally. Imagine working 60 hours a week, paying half your income for a cramped apartment, and still unable to save. Imagine seeing billionaires buy yachts and penthouses while your rent doubles. Then imagine someone standing before you and saying, "We will freeze rent, tax the rich, take power back for the people." For a city stretched thin, it was electrifying, but passion alone doesn't govern a city. That's the harsh reality Mamdani now faces. The math on his desk is unforgiving. New York's budget relies on the very people he plans to tax. Corporations and developers are already whispering about leaving. Wall Street is tense. Federal officials are watching, and the residents who cheered for change may soon feel the consequences of promises made without reserves, without contingency. Emotion won the election, but arithmetic will decide the fate of the city. Still, New York has spoken. The people have chosen hope over caution, rebellion over tradition, change over comfort. And the message reverberates beyond the city limits. Other urban centers are watching, wondering, Could this be a blueprint? Could this wave of insurgent politics sweep across the country? Because if New York can shift so dramatically, then maybe no city, no system, no status quo is safe. And that uncertainty, thrilling, frightening, inevitable, is what makes this moment the true turning point in American politics. If you want, I can now take it even further and rewrite the rest of your original script, the part about New York's economic challenges, Wall Street's panic, the national political ripple effect, in the same cinematic high drama style, making it feel like a full political thriller narrative. Let me take you on a story told in numbers, decisions, and people who quietly hold a city together. New York City isn't like other cities where everyone chips in a little and the budget balances out. No, here a tiny sliver of the population carries the weight. The top 1 or 2% of earners pay nearly half of the city's taxes. On paper, sounds fair. On paper, it seems like justice. But here's the catch. These are not rooted, trapped residents. They can walk away, and more of them are starting to do exactly that. Picture this. You're running a small town. 10 families pay for everything. Schools, roads, police, fire departments. Now imagine telling them, we're doubling your property taxes. Your investments will face stricter rules. You can't raise rents. And, oh, the police in your neighborhood, maybe fewer officers soon. What would they do? Some would start scanning the map. Florida, Texas, Tennessee, places where taxes are lower, life is simpler, and their money goes further, and some of them wouldn't. Just look, they'd pack their lives and go. This isn't a theory. Economists across every political spectrum have studied this for decades. Push taxes too high, and the wealthy, especially those who can leave, will leave. It doesn't happen all at once. It's subtle at first. A hedge fund shifts its headquarters. A tech startup sets up shop somewhere cheaper. A millionaire quietly changes residency. Each exit seems small, almost negligible. But when the top 1% funds nearly half your city's budget, even a handful leaves a gaping hole. And it's not just the taxes. These are people who donate millions to charities, fund cultural institutions, employ thousands, and spend freely in local businesses. When they go, entire ecosystems vanish. One high-profile philanthropist alone, who had been the single largest donor to museums, homeless shelters, and schools, left because of tax policies. Instantly, tens of millions disappeared. Programs were cut. Cultural institutions scaled back. The city faced a grim choice. Raise taxes on everyone else or slash services. Everyone suffered. This isn't about defending billionaires or claiming they shouldn't pay their fair share. The point is simple. People respond to incentives, and ignoring that fact is a recipe for disaster. You can argue all day about fairness, but policies must reflect reality, not ideals. And the warning signs are already here before Mayor Mamdani even took office. Surveys showed 700,000 to 1 million New Yorkers, 1 in every 8 or 9 residents, were seriously planning to leave. They weren't just talking. They were checking real estate, calculating savings, considering remote work. Another survey suggested a quarter of residents might relocate, depending on how the next few years unfold. Not everyone will go. Moving is hard. But even a fraction leaving is enough to alter the city forever. And who's leaving? Not random residents. The city's lifeblood is walking out the door. Educated professionals, successful business owners, high earners at the peak of their careers. And they're heading to very specific destinations. Florida with zero income tax and sunny beaches. Texas with booming opportunities. Tennessee with affordable homes. When these moving vans leave Manhattan, they don't just take people. They take opportunity, investment, and confidence. The consequences are brutal. Less tax revenue means higher taxes for those left behind. Higher taxes push more people to leave. The cycle repeats, spinning faster and faster. History tells us this is no exaggeration. In the 1970s, New York City nearly imploded. Overextended services, bloated payrolls, and unsustainable promises pushed the city to the brink of bankruptcy. President Ford refused to help, famously summarized as Ford to city, drop dead. Crime soared. Services crumbled, middle-class families fled, and Times Square became a symbol of urban decay. Recovery took decades, radical reforms, and determined leadership. By the 2000s, the city had been reborn, but the lesson is clear. Prosperity is fragile, confidence is everything. People invest, innovate, and build when they believe the system rewards effort, punish success, or make it feel risky, and confidence evaporates. Once gone and is nearly impossible to regain, take rent freezes. On paper, it sounds noble. Renters gain stability, but landlords' costs don't freeze. Taxes rise, insurance climbs. Maintenance doesn't stop. When income is capped but costs keep rising, buildings deteriorate, landlords sell, or simply leave policies designed to protect, can unintentionally hollow out the city's foundation. New York has been here before. It has survived collapse, corruption, and exodus. But each time, survival required bold leadership, structural reform, and a clear understanding of incentives. The city thrives when policy balances fairness with practical reality, ignore human behavior, and even the most well-intentioned ideas can unravel the entire ecosystem. The question now isn't whether New York can survive, it's whether it will learn from history or repeat it. Because this time, the stakes are even higher, and the margin for error is thinner than ever. When you're in charge of a building or a city, the choices aren't always simple, and often none of them are appealing. You can ignore maintenance and hope problems fix themselves, but that's a gamble that rarely pays off. You could try to make up lost revenue by charging for things that used to be free, but that usually just frustrates tenants and pushes them away. Or maybe you decide the investment isn't worth the effort, selling to the highest bidder, often a large corporation, that treats buildings like numbers on a spreadsheet. Worst of all, you might just let the property fall into disrepair until it has no value at all. Now, imagine thousands of property owners across a city facing the same choices. What happens to the housing market when this becomes the norm? Buildings age faster, fewer new apartments get built, and the overall quality of housing declines. Investors shy away from markets where governments impose strict controls, like rent freezes, because it limits the return on their investments. The result is a worsening housing shortage, even as demand continues to rise. The irony is brutal. When the freeze eventually ends, and it always does, rents often surge dramatically. Landlords suddenly need to recoup years of losses, leaving tenants to face skyrocketing costs. Economists have studied this pattern in cities across the world. One even compared aggressive rent controls to a hydrogen bomb for the local real estate market. Not a small explosion, but a catastrophic one. This clash illustrates a larger truth. There's a constant tension between what feels morally satisfying and what actually works. It's easy to cheer policies that punish landlords, but housing is a market, and markets follow rules whether we like them or not. Ideology might feel righteous, but economics is unforgiving, and the story doesn't stop in one city. Local events often ripple outward, affecting broader systems. While New Yorkers were navigating ballot confusion and election drama, California was facing its own crisis. The federal government announced a criminal investigation into Governor Gavin Newsom's Proposition 50, a redistricting measure accused of manipulating electoral maps to favor Democrats. But the probe wasn't about redistricting itself. It focused on how ballots were distributed. Officials claimed that mail-in ballots were sent to people who weren't legally eligible to vote, including non-citizens, which under federal law counts as postal fraud. That's a serious crime with potential prison time, fines, and even deportation, the administration warned. That California's universal mail-in system created conditions where fraud wasn't just possible, it was likely. Whether the investigation ultimately uncovers widespread wrongdoing is still unknown. But the announcement coming during election season for other races across the country sent a powerful message. It reinforced a narrative many have been hearing for years, that election systems are untrustworthy, that someone somewhere is trying to gain the results, and that outcomes may not reflect what voters actually wanted. This is a fundamental threat to democracy. The system relies on a basic agreement. We compete for votes, we count them fairly, and the winner is whoever earns the most support when large groups of people on both sides of the political spectrum lose faith in that system. The consequences ripple through everyday life. Trump supporters spent years alleging that the 2020 election was stolen, while progressive activists argue that investigations into mail-in ballots are politically motivated efforts to suppress votes. What's striking is that despite their political differences, both sides often use the same strategy, portraying themselves as outsiders battling a corrupt system. Both claim the system is rigged. Both rely on stirring fear and emotional polarization, making their supporters feel the other side is not only wrong, but actively threatening the values and safety of society. Consider the broader implications. If both sides declare each other illegitimate, who is left to trust the system? If Republicans claim Democratic victories are fraudulent, and Democrats claim Republican wins are suppressed, democracy itself struggles to function. There isn't an easy answer, but it's one of the most pressing questions facing the nation. While politicians argue about who is undermining democracy, real people experience the consequences daily, consequences that don't care about ideology. For ordinary citizens, what matters most is stability. Can they afford their lives? Are their neighborhoods safe? Are their communities improving or falling apart? Aggressive policies targeting wealthy residents might feel like justice or fairness in the abstract, but they often lead to empty storefronts, understaffed public services, and deteriorating infrastructure. Libraries operate with fewer hours, police departments are stretched thin, roads go unrepaired, and parks fall into neglect. These aren't glamorous problems, but they are the backbone of a functioning city. There's an old saying, you can't tax your way to prosperity. Another way to put it, taking from one group only works as long as that group stays around. When the people who support your policies leave, the system collapses. Empty coffers mean public services suffer, neighborhoods decline, and the cycle repeats itself, leaving everyone worse off. Not just the wealthy, but the community as a whole. Think back to the 1990s, when Rudy Giuliani took the helm in New York City. The city was still bearing the scars of decades past. Crime was rampant, neighborhoods were struggling, and life felt unsafe for many residents. Giuliani introduced what became known as broken windows policing, the idea that addressing small signs of disorder could prevent larger problems from spiraling out of control. He partnered with the business community instead of alienating it. He focused on practical solutions, on making the city function efficiently rather than grand ideological pronouncements. Were his policies perfect? Certainly not. Did everyone support them? Far from it, but the results were clear and tangible. Crime plummeted, streets became safer, businesses reinvested, and property values climbed. Increased tax revenue allowed the city to improve services, which attracted more residents, which further boosted revenue. The city entered a virtuous cycle, turning decades of decline into measurable progress. Now those hard-won gains are at risk. Calls to defund the police in a city that remembers high crime firsthand are not abstract debates. They carry real-world consequences. Criticizing the business community that sustains jobs and livelihoods can backfire just as severely. Ideological gestures might feel satisfying, but the cost is measured in safety, opportunity, and economic stability. At a deeper level, this debate is about America's identity. Are we a nation that celebrates innovation, effort, and success, or one that views achievement with suspicion and seeks to redistribute outcomes? Are we committed to equality of opportunity or equality of result? Do we value independence and self-reliance or collective dependence? Do we trust markets to allocate resources or governments? These questions have defined the country since its founding, but today they are louder and more urgent than ever. Politicians like Mamdani appeal to younger voters who feel left behind by the current system. They promise rent freezes, government-run stores, and free public transit, solutions that resonate with those frustrated by economic stagnation and limited prospects compared to their parents' generation. That frustration is real and understandable, but the solutions offered often ignore lessons of history. Rent control repeatedly leads to housing shortages. Government-run enterprises frequently suffer inefficiency. Price caps create scarcity. These aren't ideological talking points, they're practical realities. Attempting to override economic principles through sheer will or legislation is like trying to make water flow uphill. You can build pumps, spend enormous resources, and fight gravity, but ultimately, reality prevails. Working with natural forces, channeling them efficiently, and leveraging them productively achieves far more than futile resistance. The clash in New York is exactly this. The tension between idealism that refuses limits and pragmatism that works within them, between believing you can bend reality to your will and accepting that reality has rules whether you like them or not. Why should this matter to someone outside New York, in Iowa or Arizona or Oregon? Because what happens in New York doesn't stay in New York. Migration patterns show people and wealth moving from high-tax, regulation-heavy states to lower-tax, more business-friendly ones. Texas alone has gained hundreds of thousands of residents, and Florida has absorbed trillions in income from relocations over the last decade. These moves aren't just symbolic. They shift economic power, jobs, and opportunities. Companies take more than capital with them. They bring tax revenue, innovation, and influence. Population shifts also redraw political power, affecting congressional representation and electoral votes. States losing residents lose influence, while states gaining residents gain it. Over time, these movements create distinct regional cultures. People self-select based on values and economic preferences, reinforcing policies and ideologies within those regions. This can be liberating. If you dislike your state's policies, you can move, but it also erodes shared national experiences and understanding, making it easier to demonize people who live elsewhere. Looking forward, New York faces two potential paths. One is collapse and recovery. If economic fundamentals continue to weaken, if businesses leave, tax revenue falls, services decline, and crime rises, the city may hit bottom. That would be devastating for residents, but history suggests that crises can catalyze meaningful reform. When the problems become undeniable, practical solutions and new leadership can emerge, setting the stage for rebuilding on a stronger, more sustainable foundation. The other path is adaptation and reinvention. Perhaps new leadership finds creative ways to achieve progressive goals without undermining the city's foundations. Affordable housing could improve without destructive rent freezes. Services could expand without driving out taxpayers. It's a tougher, less certain path, but sometimes governing reality forces moderation, pragmatism, and compromise. Though I'm skeptical based on campaign rhetoric, it's not impossible. In the coming months, we'll see which path unfolds. Will the predicted exodus of people and businesses accelerate? Or will New Yorkers give new leadership a chance? Will crime rise or continue its decline? Will other cities look to New York as a model or as a cautionary tale? These are more than local issues. They reflect broader questions about how policy, culture, and economics interact in modern America. What's undeniable is that New Yorkers, and Americans more broadly, are demanding change. They want someone willing to challenge entrenched power, to promise a better future, to act decisively. That desire is human and understandable. The real question is whether the changes being implemented will improve lives or repeat past mistakes. The next few months will tell, so I want to hear your thoughts. Will New York lead the nation toward a new future or repeat the missteps of the past? Does Mamdani represent a corrective to inequality or a risky experiment that may hurt the very people he intends to help? Share your perspective in the comments. Hit like if you value this kind of analysis, and subscribe so we can continue exploring the deeper forces shaping our world. The choices made in New York now won't stay confined to the city. They'll ripple across the country for years. Understanding what's really happening beyond the headlines is crucial. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.